Hello and welcome back. As always, my name is Kelly, and now that we've talked about the crap of last year, I think it's time to celebrate. And just like last year, since we're celebrating, time for a drink. Yeah, come on. Stupid lotion. This is why you don't grease up your hands before you do this. Lotion is making this impossible to open. Sake is the water of life. And of course, just to add a little color, cheers to a new year. Unlike last year, this drink is meant to be sipped, not downed. All in all, 2023 felt like a year of everything kind of collapsing in on itself. I said it in the worst list, but it really did feel like all of the big studios kind of failed and flopped, and a lot more smaller indie-ish productions felt like they were the ones rising to the top. Well, I wouldn't say this is a good year in film. I'd say this is probably a turning point in film. We're going to be seeing a lot of studios shifting from what was done before and failed spectacularly this year and moving forward with a lot of new direction and a lot of new stuff. So ultimately, I'm hopeful moving forward a little bit. And that hope deserves a second drink. And then we'll start the honorable mentions with the movies I didn't get a chance to see. Barbie, The Killer, and Godzilla Minus One. The reason these are all getting honorable mentions is because, from everything I've heard about Godzilla and The Killer in particular, they would have easily made my list had I actually seen them. But I do feel that Barbie deserves an honorable mention on this as well, because it got more people excited to go see movies in theaters again than probably anything else this year. Minus one thing, but we'll get to it in a second. Saw 10. Longtime viewers of the channel know that I'm a fan of the Saw franchise, and Saw 10 is probably the best we've gotten from this franchise in a very long time. Blue Beetle. I am a massive fan of the Blue Beetle comics, and this movie was so close to making it on this list. So close. Scream 6. Honestly, what can I say? A lot of good horror films came out this year, despite the really, really bad ones that I unfortunately had to go see this last week. Thanksgiving. If you have ever worked in retail, especially in retail during Black Friday from like 10 years ago, you need to watch the opening 20 minutes of this film. Just do it. Just do it. And just like on my worst list, I'm technically including something here that deserves an honorable mention, but technically doesn't qualify for my list. Taylor Swift Eras Tour. Yeah, this isn't really a film, it's a concert, so it doesn't qualify for this list. But the concert itself was so damn good that it got a lot of people excited and a lot of people in the theaters. More so than anything else that came out this year. So it does deserve honorable mention. And with the honorable mentions out of the way, let's start the list proper with number 10 and one more drink. Number 10. A Haunting in Venice. Yeah, for most of the time that I was writing this list, Blue Beetle and this one were kind of neck and neck. But at the end of the day, I had to be honest with myself, and from a technical level, on a writing, script, acting level, A Haunting in Venice is a better movie. It is a great character piece, really showcasing Kenneth Braga's range as he plays this character for a third time in a much different state than you've seen him ever before. Kenneth Braga portrays Hercule Poirot in this in a much more depressed, low state than he's ever played in any of the movies before. He's genuinely been broken, and you can really feel that through the performance. And when he gets dragged back into this case that has a lot of horror elements where he just seems to be hallucinating and seemingly losing his mind, you truly do feel for the character. This film combines a lot of horror traits and tropes with genuinely good mystery as to what's going on and what are we seeing. There is a genuine argument to be made as to whether or not Hercule is going mad or if he's having visions of the dead. And by the end of this film, you really do feel that new life has been breathed into this character and you want to see where it's going to go. Even if it's probably going to end here. This might be the last of this trilogy, I guess. I really hope it's not, because I like what they've been doing on all these films, but I do know that Agatha Christie fans are not particular fans of these films, mostly because of how they change things, but They probably aren't a fan of this one in particular because Tina Fey is essentially playing a self-insert Agatha Christie knockoff who is kind of sort of an asshole. That reaction combined with the less than spectacular sales numbers, and this film is probably going to be the last, but it's still worth watching nonetheless.
Number 9. Mission Impossible Dead Reckoning Part 1.
Now to swing from a subtle murder mystery into straight up action, we get Mission Impossible Dead Reckoning Part 1. It is genuinely shocking how good these films just keep getting. Think of any other franchise, an action or adventure or any other genre you can think of. By the time you get to 7 part 1 of a series, this is when things start falling apart. But Dead Reckoning feels like it's got new life in it. Every single film just keeps building off of the last one and moving in completely, well, not different directions, but at least enjoyable directions. Every single one of these Mission Impossibles feels like there's a new scale of action, new death-defying stunts, new leaps they want to try. And you would think that there is no way that you could get higher than strapping yourself to the side of a plane or hanging from a helicopter over a big ravine. Yet they keep doing it. Tom Cruise just keeps throwing himself off of every single mountain he comes across, and frankly speaking, I'm there for it every single time. The only negative I will give this film is the part 1 at the end of the title. This movie doesn't feel like it has a very satisfying conclusion, just because, well, it's part 1 of 2. There's another half of this movie somewhere else. It's not the only film this year that did this, but it is probably the worst of all of them that did. And being the worst, it's still able to get itself on my best list. That is a sign of good quality. Just, Tom Cruise, please don't die strapping yourself to the side of a rocket launching into space. We all know that's where this is going, but please don't do it. I want to see more from you.
Number 8. Creed 3.
Yeah, surprisingly, I haven't seen this one pop up on a lot of people's best lists, but maybe that's just because, Godzilla and the Killers happened. Maybe this wouldn't have made my list if I'd actually seen those ones in time. But honestly, this is one of the best sports films I've ever seen. I don't understand why it's not getting a lot more of the praise. I mean, it's not like half of this production is suddenly untouchable. Oh yeah, we need a Jonathan Majors thing. Yeah, sidestepping that entire controversy, this film is genuine proof that probably moving away from the Rocky formula is the best way to keep these films going. Reportedly, Sylvester Stallone wasn't too happy with his production because it did a lot more surreal imagery. There's some shots lifted straight out of anime pretty much thrown inside of here. If you've watched Hajime no Ippo, you've seen them. When you get to the final fight between Creed and his longtime friend Damian Anderson, you genuinely feel like this isn't a fight in the ring for some title. This is a fight between really your past and your future clashing with each other. This fight is built up amazingly, and shifting the ring around them as they're just throwing these punches, throwing up the bars, or throwing in some lights, or removing the audience entirely. You genuinely feel this fight is a lot more gripping and epic and personally meaningful than almost anything you've seen inside of this franchise. And let me remind you that Creed 2 brought back Drago, and it handled that spectacularly. Granted, I think that Creed 2 is better than Creed 3. When you're ranking the scales, I probably put it Creed 2, Creed 3, and Creed 1. But these three films are so close to each other in quality that it is genuinely surprising, in a good way, that they're continuing this franchise. I can't wait to see Creed 4. I really can't. Please don't let that be a poorly aged thing and them say that Creed 4 got canceled. Just please don't.
Number 7. The Creator.
Hear ye, we have proof that low-budget films can still be spectacular. Reportedly, this was a budget of like $85 million, so low budget depends on your definition. But we live in a day and age where most films from big studios have budgets of $100 to $500 million, all expecting to make $1 billion. But this film had a budget way lower than all of that, yet it blows all of them visually out of the water. Everything feels practical. It feels lived in. When you have a robot on screen, I don't see the CGI arm movements. I see a guy in a robot suit, and it looks more convincing than any CGI will ever be. I wholeheartedly believe that the actor inside of this is missing an arm, even though I know that he's not, because the effect was just that good. But enough of me gushing over the actual visuals of it. Let's talk about the story. And this story is a sci-fi epic that feels a lot closer because, generative AI is everywhere. Yeah, it's another future apocalypse kind of, sort of, with some politics inside of it that revolves around AI and things, but it does feel like a weird new spin on it. Long gone are the days of Cameron, Terminator, Skynet, AI is going to destroy us, and more of, well, AI is going to be here, so we might as well find the good AI versus the bad AI, which is usually just the ones that can be controlled by the government and drop missiles on random people. Yeah, this movie wasn't exactly subtle with some of its politics, but that wasn't a bad thing. I feel like it's one of those things that just needed to be said. And if you're going to get any actors to play the military that's supposed to hammer this home, it might as well be the guy that did Sid from Final Fantasy 16 this year. By God, was it nice to see him pop up in other places. But I feel like this is the movie we need more of. Smaller scale productions that just focus their money less on marketing and big special effects and more on just making the film good. But I feel that the creator is much more the model that most films should try to achieve. Lower budget, focused intent, great writing, and really bringing in the actors that make your script shine. Also a shout out to, I'm going to probably ruin this, Madeline Yuna Yovels. I apologize. I'm not going to say that right. But shout out to her because in a movie with a lot of really good actors inside of it, she stood on par with all of them. Look for her in more films. She's got talent, and I wouldn't be surprised if we see a lot more from her.
Number 6. The Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3.
And for those who watched my worst list, yes, this is the one Marvel production this year that didn't suck. Not counting Loki Season 2. This is a movie list, not a TV list. But that just goes to show what happens when you actually seem to care about the production you're making. And James Gunn cared a lot. This is seemingly James Gunn's last production with the MCU, and it's very clear that he didn't want to half-ass it. Gunn brought the Guardians of the Galaxy into this universe and made them household names. And he wanted to make sure that with his last adventure with them, that he did give them all the justice they deserve. And it's not like Gunn was the only one who was really, really pushing this project. You can tell that every actor is putting 110% even into the bit roles they were given. But by far the standout was Rocket and his backstory, which really brought tears to a lot of people's eyes. I'm a heartless bastard, so I did not cry, but there were a lot of feels. But it wasn't just the story. The visuals were amazing. They all felt finished, even though they had the Marvel sheen to them. The action was engaging and exciting. There was even a lot of tension as you weren't sure who was going to make it out of the movie alive. This is the last Guardians production, and you'd imagine that Gunn would probably want to end the Guardians, and he kind of sort of did, at least until the Marvel heads make them come back. This film truly does feel like the third in a trilogy, even if the story isn't as overarching because, Infinity War and all the other things kind of messed with his characters a little bit. Everyone, including Gunn, were able to take that in stride and give us a genuinely great capstone to mark the end of the Guardians and the end of Gunn at Marvel. And this is why I'm genuinely hopeful for DC moving forward, because if Gunn puts as much quality into Superman or Batman or Wonder Woman over there as he did with the Guardians, we're going to get something special. And then the DC execs are going to, ham-fist him and shove a bunch of his movies into the vault so they can get another tax write-off. So, nothing changes.
Number 5. Killers of the Flower Moon.
So, I've talked a lot of crap about Martin Scorsese, both on camera and off. I'm not a big fan of the old man yelling at Marvel for ruining cinema because people didn't go and see some of his other movies. Granted, he's not the only one who said stuff like that. Ridley Scott also has put his foot in his mouth a couple of times. But I am glad that Martin Scorsese can shut me up on occasion by giving us such a high bar to reach for. Killers of the Flower Moon is a story that everyone should learn about inside of their high school history courses. Unfortunately, it isn't, and that is just another tragedy to add to the pile of everything that's happened to this Native American people. And this film captures that tragedy in such a brutal and frankly honest way that it kind of hurts to watch. This film truly does capture the tragedies that the Osage people had to go through and really makes you sick to your stomach throughout the course of this, with all of the actors and actresses giving you 110% to give you that feeling. And while you have amazing acting and portrayals from Robert De Niro and Leonardo DiCaprio as these villains of the movie, the real standout was Lily Gladstone inside of this. She is the heart and soul of this film, and you feel everything that happens to her viscerally. Her performance in this film are so captivating and engaging that you don't even realize that this movie's 3.5 hours long. I mean, I did in the theater, but that's because I drank a big 52 ounce because I was an idiot. Don't be like me. Pace yourself with the soda. And then go see this film.
Number 4. John Wick, Chapter 4.
This film is, bar none, the best action film we got in 2023. Every single part of this film, whether it be the gunplay, whether it be the choreography, the hand-to-hand stunts, the goddamn camera work, all of it has been turned up to 11 and is just drenched in style for you to enjoy. And it makes this film the perfect capstone to end John Wick's story in this universe. I'm glad to see a lot of spin-offs coming off of this, going into stuff like the Continental or the Ballerina, as we're going to see later this year, supposedly. Because it feels like we haven't gotten enough exploration of this world. There's a mythos growing here in a bunch of different directions, and I really think that we're going to see something with the High Table actually getting a dead reckoning, if you get my drift. But John Wick was so close to giving him that, especially in this movie. It genuinely feels amazing when he does get to that final duel at the top of the damn stairs. Even after he falls down all of those stairs multiple times. But it's clear that everyone brought their A game to this. From what I've heard, originally there was going to be a Chapter 4 and a Chapter 5, but that got canned for budgetary reasons. So they pretty much just smashed John Wick Chapters 4 and 5 into one film. It kind of shows, but it also really works because of it. All the new characters they introduce really do fit this world and give us a different idea of how assassination kind of works as a business. Whether it be the blind servant working directly for the table, or it be the hunter tracker who is always on the tails of his target, waiting for that, bounty to go up just one more point. And the beautiful carnage that ensues, whether it be sword fights, gun fights, or just loading every single shotgun with dragon's breath and going to town. It's also gripping and engaging. You just want to see what happens next, just to say, they actually did that? And it says something that a film like this just allows itself to end. Way too often, they try to milk these for all they're worth. Having spin-offs with new characters in different directions, I'm looking forward to that. But it really does feel like John's story has finally come to a good end, and if they retcon it in any way to bring him back, I feel it would be a disservice to pretty much every one of us that enjoyed these films. The only thing bad about this film is that I'm sad to say John Wick is gone. I feel like a lot of action movies had to up their game because of John Wick. So, will that still happen moving in the future? Only time will tell, but I think we can all agree that John Wick, for everything that it did across all 4 of its films, left one hell of an impact. Now, before we get into the top three, I do just want to say that all three of these films, in my opinion, were kind of just neck and neck. I was shuffling them around, and I do feel like number one deserves its spot, but very easily any of these three could have taken it depending on my mood. So, without further ado.
Number 3, Shizume.
I have a kind of weird relationship with a lot of the Makoto Shinkai films. I feel that they range from amazing god tier level with like Garden of Words or Your Name to kind of pretty cringy but beautiful looking not great films like 5 centimeters per second or Weathering with You. I mostly feel that way because Makoto Shinkai pretty much makes the same movie every single time. Makoto Shinkai's tropes are so just blatant sometimes that really you don't even have to see his directing credit. You just have to see a couple of scenes from the movie to say, oh, this is Makoto Shinkai. The overemphasis on weather effects, the star-crossed lover scenario, the supernatural element that's kind of making everything not work. Like, it's just his tropes and style. And that's not necessarily a bad thing, but it does mean that, well, sometimes you get a Your Name, and then you get a Weathering with You right afterwards. So on the scale, would I put Shizume with Your Name? Well, obviously, it's number 3 on my best list. I'd actually go a step further and say that while Your Name is still the record-breaking monster hit of a movie that it was, Shizume actually surpasses it in my opinion. The story is simple enough. Shizume just randomly sees this thing in the sky that no one else can apparently see, follows it to a door, and she gets sucked into an adventure where a guy turns into a chair and she has to try to find a cat to turn him back. The journey of self-discovery for Shizume throughout the course of the film, as well as their relationship with a goddamn chair, are so engaging and gripping that it's genuinely shocking. I didn't think you'd be able to outdo yourself with the relationship in Your Name, but he did it. And again, it's to a goddamn chair. And on top of that, the visuals are just so gorgeous. The monster coming out of these doors, crawling out, turning into this demented earthworm thing that's about to destroy Japan. Like, it is just so beautiful. And the thing that makes this over the top for me is the soundtrack. This is one of the best anime movie soundtracks I've heard in a long while. I still, to this day, even though I haven't watched Shizume in a long while, I still hum that tune that they used in all the trailers, that they used in the second act of this film. It is so beautiful, haunting, yet empowering. It is... oh, it's just so good. And I will say, just another thing that kind of struck me while I was watching the movie is just how much damage people occurred in this film. Like, usually inside of movies like this that are meant to be not about action or anything like that, they might scrape themselves, have a cut or something. That doesn't really feel like they got hurt at all. But Shizume at the end of the second act, like, her feet are bleeding, her clothes are torn up, she's clearly just not all there. She actually felt like she incurred damage. And that is just such a rarity. And it really made everything feel just so much more real because of it. I can't sing this movie's praises enough. Just go watch it. If for no other reason than so you can understand why Harrison Ford carried that stupid chair to the Golden Globes. I can't believe he did that.
Number 2, Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse.
I still hold that John Wick 4 is the best action film that we've got all of last year. But the action-adventure storyline that we got out of Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse is just so over-the-top amazing and proof that we're not really sick of superhero films. We're sick of bad superhero films. And there's a lot more bad that came out last year than there was good. But we did get one hell of a good one to bring up the average. The animation on this is gorgeous. You can tell that every single universe had its own unique style to it. No two worlds looked or felt the same. And all of the various different Spider-Men that they brought into here, yeah, it kind of felt like cameo for cameo shake. Like, oh, look, Insomniac Spider-Man. Ben Reilly. Hey, look, it's Cowboy Spider-Man. The way all of these different Spider-Men are allowed to just breathe and establish themselves, whether it be Spider-Punk or Spider-Man 2099, and like Gwen, Spider-Gwen. Like, the way they've just expanded on these characters and the way they just give them room to breathe and establish themselves without ever feeling like they're hogging the spotlight from, the actual Spider-Man we're following. And combining that with just the stunning visuals, you get such creative action. You get so many different set pieces. Everything has a three-dimensional movement to it. It's not as simple as just running this way or going that way. Everything's moving in different directions, being pulled every which way. It's truly masterful. At times, it does seem like it's sensory overload, but surprisingly, you do follow it despite that. Now, one of the reasons this isn't my number one is because, like Mission Impossible, this is technically part one. And while they do set everything up, they probably spend a little bit too much time setting things up. The last 20 minutes is almost dedicated to the setup itself. And that might have been a little bit too long. And honestly, that might have been what really kind of took it from the top spot, in my opinion. But that one pacing flaw aside, this film is just a masterpiece. There's no other way to say it. You feel for it, you're enthralled throughout all of it, there's good messaging and morals, and it does make me really curious about what's coming next. But I do feel there was one film that was much more of a masterpiece this year.
Number 1. Oppenheimer.
Oppenheimer is Christopher Nolan's masterpiece. Just like with Shizume, it's pretty much all of his tropes you've ever seen in every other film that often get made fun of, but perfected. Stories told out of order, but it all flows and makes perfect sense. All of his preferred actors that you see pretty much in every production are here, and they are exceptional. Cillian Murphy especially, just knocked it out of the park. Best actor nod right there, hands down. And there's an emphasis on practical effects to such a degree that there are no CG shots in this film at all, which is just mind-blowing. Especially when they get to the actual nuke scene. That was haunting. And you're telling me that was all done in camera with no added help at all? Damn. There goes your best visual effects Oscar nod right there. And despite this film just being basically a biopic, everyone went to go see it. Granted, it was because of the meme with Oppenheimer, but still, this movie put butts in seats, which a lot of films this year, even good ones, can't actually say. This film raised the bar and standard that we all want to see from films now. You can't go to a biopic film without thinking that it's going to be compared to this now. This film is a masterpiece and a must-watch. This is one of the best number ones I've ever had on any of my best lists. I love it, and I hope you all go see it, and for a lot of you, you probably already have. So go watch it again. The best part of film. The rewatch. And that's it for me and 2023 as a whole. Do you agree? Did I miss any films? Let me know in the comments down below. Let's get some healthy discussion going. And as always, if you like what you saw, be sure to like, share, subscribe, all those things that make the channel numbers go bigger. And now we look into 2024, and I can say my plan is to have a lot more content for you. So I hope you're willing to sit back and enjoy. But until next time.